Okay, so this video we're going to talk about healing. Healing in general for tattoos is important, but let's talk about fine line and healing. So, for example, let's say we have a big tattoo, traditional or large scale dragon, right? If one spot on that tattoo is healed poorly, that does not compromise the entire image of the tattoo. You can still see it as a dragon. It still, it still holds. Whereas if it's scaled down to fine line, maybe it's like a little tiny dragon, right? If one part of the tattoo is healed poorly, that could be an entire hand of the dragon or part of the face of the dragon. It just matters a lot more when we're talking about fine line. So, what affects the healing process in a tattoo? I'm going to talk about depth. So depth, if you go too deep, it gets blown out. If it's too shallow, it will fade. So when it heals, it'll heal smudged or faded. Accuracy. If you are inaccurate with your lines and your shading is uneven, then that will affect healing too, because when the lines or the details of the tattoo heal, you're not going to really the image is not going to be as straightforward, because if the lines are too shaky and the details all merge together, then you don't really know what you're looking at, right? Also, let's say the third one, it's not an official term, but I'm going to say duration. That means overworked or underworked. So if you stay in one spot for too long and tattoo that spot over and over, the skin is going to get chewed up. It's going to bleed a lot. It's going to be very red and irritated. So that's going to compromise healing too. That usually when the skin is overworked and it heals, it becomes sort of faded because the skin is damaged, and when it heals, it's, I guess, more scar tissue on it. So those three things are basically depth, accuracy, and duration. So staying on one place for too long is no good. If you are having trouble with depth, accuracy, duration, so it just means you need a little bit more practice. So don't worry, just keep practicing until you get more comfortable with your hand steadiness. Another thing I should talk about is the voltage of a machine, and whether the machine is tuned to be more rough or softer. So so for example, I use the Sol Nova. It's very light, it's very gentle, and for me it's perfect for my single needle work. And Cheyenne's a great company, not sponsored, of course, I'm not even big enough yet, but I say a lot of good things about Cheyenne because they're a great company. Whereas if we're going to take a coil machine, I believe there are machine makers that tune certain coil machines for fine line, but it's just in general that build of machine is too strong for fine line. So if you're going to take a coil machine and run a single needle, that's already not a great idea. Also, voltage. I tend to stay around 6 volts, maybe 6.5. The Cheyenne machine uses a displayless voltage, so previously I used a Scion pen and I would hover around 6 to 6.5. I would go lighter with single needles, so I would say 6, maybe 5.5. You gotta experiment with how you like it. So 5.5, 6, 6.5. So keep the voltage low if you're using single needle, and it'll improve the healing of your tattoos. Also, a small mention, equipment will affect healing too. So if it's poor equipment, if you're using let's say a really bad single needle cartridge and the ink flow is horrible, or any other reason, or the machine is inconsistent, maybe it's running very hard even though the display is low, whatever. If it's a cheap machine, if you use equipment like that, that might compromise your healing as well. So make sure you use quality equipment in your tattooing. Okay, so another thing that is important in terms of healing is the sizing of your tattoos. So if you size the tattoos too small and all the details are cramped and cluttered, then when it heals, all the details are going to merge and sort of turn into a gray blob over time. And contrast too. Contrast also affects that. So let's say you did merge all those small details. If there's high contrast between the details, even at that clutter, you can still at least see the contrast. So two things: contrast and breathing room for the details. My old coworker Juan told me this. I still remember. And it's very important for fine line tattoos. So let's say you up the contrast, or there's a lot of contrast in the image, and you don't size it too small. There's enough breathing room. Then that tattoo should hold very well. That's very important. Yeah, so if you find a reference image that you like and you want to tattoo it, you can always edit the image to heighten the contrast within reason. You don't want it to look ridiculous, and just size it properly. If there's let's say a butterfly, and you size it like this, you should basically scale the detail down if you want it that small. You don't want it that small and clutter and include all the little intricate details in there. It's not going to work on skin. It might work on paper or a different medium, but skin, because the way tattoos heal under your skin, it's just going to blob over time, so it's not a good idea. What else should we talk about? Another thing that would affect healing is aftercare. So proper aftercare is important because, so let's say you got everything right. You got the depth right, you got the accuracy right, you got the duration right, your machine is tuned properly, it's not too hard, the voltage is good, your equipment is quality equipment, the contrast is enough, the breathing room for the details are enough, so the sizing is adequate. You got all that right. Now comes the aftercare, because you can get all these right, and if you are your tattoo gets infected in some way, then the skin will heal like scar tissue, and that just you basically just did all that for nothing. So aftercare is important. I'm not going to explain my aftercare. I'll save that for a different video, but I just need to mention aftercare is important. Okay, so let's say aftercare was good, right? Now comes the long-term healing. What happens to fine line tattoos over long periods of time, like 15 years, 20 years? In general, all tattoos fade and blob over time. It's just basically up to you whether you want a faded fine line over time. If you want it to last forever, you should probably go for something bigger. You should probably go for traditional, large scale, maybe a bodysuit. Traditional Japanese bodysuits they heal beautifully over long periods of time. If that's your cup of tea, you should go for that. But if you want fine line and you like the aesthetic of fine line and you're okay with it lasting for however long it will last, and even if it does blob, let's say 20, 30 years down the line, if the contrast and the breathing room for detail and the execution is all done well, it should still hold its image readability. So you can still kind of make out what it is, and the sizing is proper too. So it's nothing like, okay, you get fine line, it's just gonna turn to dust over time. It's not like that. It still holds its shape. So this tattoo of a snake that I have, there was little detail of ribs underneath the lighter gray tones. So there's two gray tones, right? Darker and a lighter. There was actually little dotted lines, but it just merged to pretty much gray. So how old is this? It's a couple years old, maybe 4 or 5 years. And also the detail was rendered very lightly. So basically all that detail is lost, right? So that's why I say you need to scale up bigger if you want those tiny details to last. And if you do clutter it, it'll just turn into gray. Similarly, this chainmail, you can still make out the details, but it's in the process of turning into gray, right? But look at it, it still overall retains its image. It's a English bowman with a bow, right? This is a snake. It's obviously readable. So over 20-30 years, you can still see its shape. So it's not like it will turn to nothing, right? So get that misconception out of your head if that's what you believed about fine lines. Okay, so other things that I have not talked about, color healing. I am not experienced enough with color to speak about it, confidently. So I'm going to omit that from this video. What else have I not mentioned about healing? Maybe sun exposure. Sun exposure, this tattoo is always outside of the sleeve, so it always hits the sun. And like I said, it still retains its shape. I feel like it does affect it, but not as much as you might think. But it still does affect it though. Well, so that's everything I can think of at the moment about healing and fine line healing. Hopefully this gives you more perspective on fine line and healing. If I missed anything, you can feel free to let me know, in the comments, or if you want to DM me, it's up to you. And I could probably make more videos in the future, and maybe, yeah, okay, so.